Hi everyone, my name is Brian, and in this video we're going to take all the work that we've been doing so far and actually validate the cookies that we receive back. Let's get started. Okay, so like I mentioned, cookies can be sent back just like this, or we can actually send back a set of options. So let's just create another variable here called payload options. We're just going to configure that as a constant here, and I'm really putting that here for demonstration purposes. Ideally this is going to be, we'll move this into a configuration file in a little bit. So if we reference back to how the two-cookie authorization model works, on our payload cookie option, we want to set a few values. The first one we're going to set is the max age. So this is where we are telling the browser, hey, only let this cookie live for a period of time. So let's do 1,000 times 30, and this is all in milliseconds. So that's basically telling it 30 seconds is how long this cookie is going to live for. We also want to set the same site parameter to be true. And finally, we want to set the secure to also be true. Now it's a little tricky here. We need to disable this now because we're on localhost, and just to make it easier for testing. But normally we would make this secure so that it's only going to be passed if the connection is secured by HTTPS. So now let's create another variable called signature options. And this is going to look similar, but the signature has an HTTP only parameter set to true. Again, the same site is also true. So this is telling the browser only send this cookie back for this same exact site. And so for our local example, that's just localhost. And again, we're going to set secure to be equal true, but because we are running locally, we can't do that easily right now. So I'm just going to disable it, signature options. So now we're passing in, for both the payload and the signature cookies, the name of the token, the actual value for the token, or for the cookie rather, and the options, the configuration options. So again, for the payload options, they're slightly different than the signature options. All right, so if we save this, NodeMon will refresh, and we will restart our browser. Let's see if we can. We can see now here, if we collapse this down, let's expand it a little bit. We can see that our payload now expires in 30 seconds, and our signature expires after the session. And our signature payload is also set to be HTTP only. So this means no JavaScript can be executed to actually get access to this signature. So if you remember, this allows us to only expose the payload portion of the JSON Web Token to the browser, and the signature just hangs out as a cookie, but we don't access it. So anyone that might attack our website should not be able to get a full working JSON Web Token because they are not able to get the signature through JavaScript. And that's kind of where the power of this design comes in. All right, so now we are setting our cookie and sending it back in the response. The next thing that we want to do is to actually use that information that's sent back. And for that, we need to go over to our authorization middleware. And here we want to make some modifications. So the first thing we're going to do is get access to the cookies themselves. So here we are getting the token from the header. So I'm just going to redefine the name of this variable. And I'm going to create a few new variables. So I'm going to create a const token cookie. And so that is going to be equal to request dot cookies. And we are looking in the request.cookies for an instance of payload. So this is just going to look in that array for the cookie with the same name. And we're going to create another option or another variable for our signature. So it's going to look very similar, just like that. So now we should have access to our two cookies. And let's create a new variable called token string. And this is going to be the actual value that we pass in to the JSON Web Token library to actually verify if we have a valid token. So let's see. First, we're going to modify our if statement. So let's do an if we have access to the token cookie, payload cookie, and we have access to the token signature cookie. Then we are going to set our token string equal to, and this is where we're just concatenating the two cookies back together. So we're just combining them back together. And we don't want a space there. Token signature cookie. And then we're going to change this to be an else if. So if we have access to the token header, so if we have access to the header, then we will set the token string. Actually, because we receive everything, so when we are passed back the token in a header, remember we'll have bearer and then the body of the token. So we actually need to strip that off, and we can do that by saying, let's see. We're going to, again, split the header, token header, so this is the body that we would receive, based on the space. So again, because we are going to receive everything as bearer space, then we want to check if the first instance of the array is actually equal to bearer, because there are different token types, ways that you can use this authorization header. So we just want to make sure that we're receiving the correct header. Let's change our return statement just to tell the user that they have an invalid token. So again, this just means that they passed us something other than a bearer type. Now, however, if they did pass a bearer type, then we will set the token string variable equal to the second part of this header that we or this array that we created, again, just based on splitting the header value by the string. Okay, so now we have our token string set. So we're going to do some modification here. Okay, so now we have our token, or we should have our token, and we want to check for that by just saying if the token string is still set to null for whatever reason, then we want to return an error, so the user actually is not validated. So we'll just change our error message. So we're not giving a whole lot of information because we don't know who could have access to these error messages. But if we do have a valid string, then we will use our else statement. Okay, so here's where we want to just pass in. So again, making some modifications here, and we'll talk through all this code again. So we want to pass in, instead of the token body that we were before, we're going to pass in the token string. So again, this token string has either been set based on the toCookie method or as a authorization header that was passed in. So we want to be able to provide for both scenarios in this example. Now, depending on your business case, you may not want or need to do that. All right. So now we are able to take the token body and verify if it is still valid. Again, it hasn't been tampered with. The signature is still intact. It hasn't expired. If everything looks good, then we want to reset a new cookie. And so we're doing this so that that 30-minute time frame that we're setting for our cookie, right now it's 30 seconds, is reset every time a user passes or makes an API request that is valid. So again, all we're doing is just resetting the recreating a cookie, really. So we want to pass the token payload cookie. So if you remember, we set that to a variable up here, so we still have access to the same cookie. Basically, all we're doing is taking the same exact information, but resetting the time. And so we need to take the same set of options, and we're going to create a variable here, and we're going to pass those same options into here. Perfect. Okay. And then the rest of our authorization middleware will continue to work like it did before. All right, so it will check for proper credentials, and if there's an issue with the credentials or anything along those lines, then the user will get an error. Okay, so now let's test this. So the way the flow works, we will call the token endpoint. We'll get a new cookie. Because our cookies only last for 30 seconds right now, then we will call the customer's endpoint, and we will be passing back the cookies just by default. The browser will pass back those cookies in the request. If we make a new request within the 30 seconds that our current cookie lasts, then the response will go through, and if our request takes longer, then we will not be authorized and we'll get an error. So I'm just going to call the token endpoint. So we can see our two signature and payload here. So now that we have those, we're going to call customers and make a request, and now we can see that we have customer results. So the way that worked, we sent a payload and a signature cookie, and we received back the payload cookie in response, and that set a new 30-second time window. So now if I make a new request, because I'm within the 30-second window, again, I'm just receiving the results back. So now let's wait for our cookie to expire, and we'll try again and see what that looks like. All right, so now our cookie has expired in the browser, and so we only sent back the signature. That didn't create a valid JSON Web Token that could then be verified. So what happened was the browser actually expired the cookie and removed it, and by doing that, we are able to manage the life of a user's session. So this might come in handy, say if it's a banking website and we want we want to manage user inactivity. So we want to kind of log them out after a period of time. This is one way that we can start to do that type of user log out systematically.